There is something sacred about the first hour of your day, not because the world demands it, but because it is the only time that still belongs entirely to you, before messages appear, before the noise begins, before the expectations of others begin to stretch your attention thin. That first hour is your quiet foundation, and how you use it will quietly shape who you become. Most people treat the morning like an accident. They wake up reacting to alarms, to emails, to the urgency of someone else's needs. And without realizing it, they hand over control before they have even opened their eyes fully. They rush, they scroll, they start the day already behind. And from that place of imbalance, everything else begins to wobble. But what if that hour was different? What if instead of running, you paused? What if you decided that before you give anything to the world, you first give something to yourself, not to perform, but to return, to your values, to your focus, to your intention. Owning your morning is not about having a perfect routine. It is about claiming the emotional tone of your day. It is choosing stillness before noise, breath before decision, purpose before productivity. It could be 10 minutes of silence. It could be writing down one thought that matters. It could be stretching without music, or drinking water while looking outside your window. The action is less important than the awareness it creates. Because when you begin your day with clarity, you lead differently. You respond instead of react. You pause before you chase. You listen to yourself before letting the world shape your mood. That hour becomes your anchor, your recalibration, your return. And no one will thank you for it. No one will notice when you choose silence over scrolling, but your energy will. Your clarity will. Your decisions will. Because everything you do later will flow from the state you begin in. Own your morning. Not because it is trendy, but because it is the only hour that teaches you to own your life. Boundaries are not walls. They are clarity. They are not designed to push people away. They are built to protect what matters within. But for many women, boundaries feel heavy. They come with guilt, with second guessing, with a quiet voice that asks, am I being too much? Am I being selfish? Am I allowed to say no and still be loved? And so we bend. We overextend. We say yes with a smile, but resentment in our chest. Not because we do not know what we need, but because we fear what others will feel when we choose it. But here is the truth. People are not hurt by your boundaries. They are simply disappointed that you are no longer available for their comfort. And that is not your burden to carry. The purpose of a boundary is not to explain yourself. It is to honor yourself. To say this is where I end and you begin. To say this is what I can offer without losing myself. When you set boundaries, you are not rejecting anyone. You are simply including yourself in the conversation. You are saying, I matter too. My energy has limits. My time has value. My peace is not a resource to be endlessly mined. And the moment you begin to believe that, everything changes. The guilt softens. The voice of doubt becomes quieter. Because now, you are not living to be agreeable. You are living to be aligned. Some will not like your boundaries. That is part of the process. But the ones who truly see you will adjust. They may not cheer, but they will respect. Because they know what it feels like to choose yourself when the world keeps asking you not to. So when the guilt comes, let it rise, but do not let it lead. Guilt is not always a sign you are doing something wrong. Sometimes it is a sign you are finally doing something different. A boundary is not a line in the sand. It is a standard. It is the way you remind yourself every single day that your life is not a reaction to what others want. It is a response to what you know is right. So, set the boundary, not to push people away, but to finally stop pushing yourself aside. There is a difference between moving your body and punishing it, a difference between chasing an image and honoring a rhythm. And for many women, movement has become a place of shame, a reminder of what they are not yet, a list of what still needs to change. The scale, the size, the reflection. So they move from guilt, from frustration, from the quiet belief that their body must be fixed before it is loved. But that kind of movement does not liberate. It exhausts, because it is not rooted in respect. It is driven by rejection. But your body is not the problem. It is the place you live, the only home you will ever truly inhabit. And like any home, it deserves to be cared for not because it is perfect, but because it holds your life. Movement is not a punishment for what you ate. It is a return to what you feel. It is a conversation with your energy, a way to remember that you are not just a mind moving through the day. You are a whole being, and your body needs you. Respecting your body does not mean pushing it to extremes. It means listening. It means moving in ways that make you feel alive, not ashamed. It could be a long walk, a slow stretch, a dance in your living room. What matters is not how many calories it burns. What matters is the message it sends, that you are worth caring for, that your breath matters, that your heart is not just a machine, but a rhythm to be honored. When movement becomes a ritual of respect, everything shifts. You stop exercising for approval and start moving for connection. You stop seeing your body as something to conquer and start seeing it as something to support. You begin to realize that strength is not just measured in how much weight you lift. It is in how gently you return after a hard week. It is in how consistently you show up when no one is watching. It is in how you carry yourself not to impress, but to feel whole. And you do not need to do it perfectly. You just need to do it consciously. To move with awareness. To move because your body was made to move. To move because stagnation is not peace. It is heaviness in disguise. Movement clears. It softens. It strengthens. Not just your muscles, but your mindset, your self-trust. Your ability to say, I am here, I am alive, and I am taking care of what is mine. So move today. Not to shrink. Not to earn rest, but to return. To your center. To your breath. To your presence. Move with care. Move with joy. Move because your body is not an obstacle. It is an ally. And the more you treat it that way, the more it will carry you not just through the day, but through a life that feels like your own. The most consistent voice in your life is not the one you hear from others. It is the one that comes from within, the voice that wakes up with you, that follows you into quiet rooms, that narrates your mistakes, your doubts, your hopes. And for too many women, that voice has turned harsh. It repeats old stories. It echoes criticism that was never yours to keep. It tells you what you are not enough, not ready, not worthy. And slowly you begin to believe it. Not because it is true, but because it is familiar. But here is what no one teaches you. The way you speak to yourself sets the tone for everything else. You can receive compliments all day, but if your internal voice is cruel, nothing will stick. You can succeed publicly, but if your inner voice only sees what is missing, the joy will never arrive. It is not enough to look confident. You must sound kind, and that sound begins with you. Speaking kindly to yourself is not about empty affirmations. It is about truth. The kind that says, I made a mistake, and I am still worthy. The kind that says, I am growing, and that process will be messy. The kind that lets you be human without shame. Because kindness is not weakness. It is correction without cruelty. It is accountability without self-abandonment. And yes, it takes practice, especially if the voice inside has been shaped by years of doubt, especially if your worth was tied to performance, to pleasing, to perfection. But every day, you get to choose again, to interrupt the old scripts, to soften the language, to speak to yourself the way you would speak to someone you love. It might feel unnatural at first. That is okay. Start small. Notice your tone. Notice the words you repeat. When you make a mistake, pause before you punish. When you feel tired, remind yourself, that rest is not laziness. When you look in the mirror, find one thing to thank your body for. These are not small things. These are seeds. And over time, they become your new normal. Because the world will always have opinions. There will always be noise. But your voice is the one you hear the most. And if that voice becomes steady, compassionate, honest, then no external pressure can destroy the foundation you have built. You become your own ally, your own comfort, your own guide. So, speak kindly. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are still here, still growing, still becoming. And that journey deserves language that heals, not harms. Say something to yourself today that helps you breathe deeper. Say it again tomorrow. And keep going until kindness becomes your default. Trust is not built in grand gestures. It is built in small moments, quiet decisions, simple follow-through. And before you learn to trust anyone else, you must first learn to trust yourself. Not because you are perfect, but because you are consistent, because you do what you say, because your word to yourself begins to carry weight. That is where confidence comes from. Not from applause, but from alignment. Every woman has made silent promises. I will rest more. I will speak up. I will stop saying yes when I mean no. I will take care of my body. I will stop chasing people who cannot hold space for me. And often, those promises fade by noon. Not because they did not matter, but because the day got loud, the world got urgent, and your needs, once again, were postponed. But what if you changed that? What if every day you made one promise? Not 5, not a list, just one. Something you can hold, something you can complete. Something that says to yourself, I see you. I will not abandon you today. Maybe it is drinking water before coffee. Maybe it is 5 minutes of silence before scrolling. Maybe it is closing your laptop at the time you said you would. The promise is not the point. The practice is. Because when you start keeping small promises, your relationship with yourself begins to shift. You stop seeing discipline as pressure. You start seeing it as care. You stop needing willpower to force your way through. You begin trusting that you will show up, not for approval, but for wholeness. You will still miss some days. That is human, but the goal is not perfection. It is trust. The kind that says, even when I fall short, I return. Even when I forget, I begin again. And the more you return, the more solid your foundation becomes. The world teaches women to be dependable for others, to show up for work, for family, for expectation. But rarely does it teach you to show up for yourself. And if you do not reclaim that role, no amount of praise will make you feel steady. Because internal trust cannot be outsourced. It must be trained. So choose your promise today. Make it simple, make it real, and keep it. Not to prove anything, but to remember that you are worth consistency, that your needs matter, that your word has value. Say to yourself, I will do this. Then do it. Let that be the beginning of a new kind of strength. Quiet, reliable, yours. There is no shortage of things in this world that can disturb your peace. A comment, a delay, a message that arrives with the wrong tone, a glance that makes you question your worth. And if you are not careful, you will spend every hour reacting to things that do not deserve your energy. You will wake up calm and go to bed exhausted, not because of what happened, but because of what you gave your attention to. The truth is, most of what unsettles you is not permanent. It is not personal. It is not even important. But your nervous system does not know that if you have never trained it to pause before it reacts. There is a difference between being sensitive and being easily shaken. One is a strength. The other is a vulnerability that comes from forgetting your center. When you are clear about who you are, you do not need to answer every challenge. You do not need to defend. every decision. You do not need to be understood by people who only listen to reply. You simply remain grounded, not because the world is quiet, but because you have chosen not to let its noise shape your direction. Being unbothered is not a performance. It is not a cold face. It is not pretending you do not care. It is a calm decision to care only about what actually matters. To recognize that peace is not found in control. It is found in discernment. The ability to say, this deserves my voice and this does not. This needs my action and this needs my silence. This is a reflection of truth and this is just noise. The more you practice it, the more you will see. You will see how much you used to carry that never belonged to you. The moods of others, the opinions of strangers, the assumptions made in passing. And you will learn how to let it pass, not by force, but by choice. You will stop interrupting your joy for someone else's discomfort. You will stop shrinking your expression to fit into someone else's frame. You will stop letting small things grow because you gave them too much light. And in that space, your presence changes. You are not less compassionate. You are more precise. You give your care where it lands. You speak when it counts. You listen without absorbing. You lead without needing to be loud. Staying unbothered is not a trait. It is a skill. And like all skills, it is built in the quiet moments when you choose not to react. When you take a breath instead of taking the bait. When you remember that not everything urgent is important. Not everything uncomfortable is unkind. And not everything that comes your way deserves to stay in your head. So begin there. Notice what pulls you off center. Then ask yourself, does this truly matter? If the answer is no, let it go. Not because you are above it, but because you have decided your peace is worth more than your pride. What you consume shapes how you think. And in the digital world, consumption is constant. You open your phone, and the world rushes in. Opinions, comparisons, fears dressed as facts, lives edited into highlight reels. And if you are not intentional, you begin to mistake input for insight. You begin to confuse scrolling with connection. And without noticing, your mind becomes crowded. Your energy becomes scattered. Your sense of self becomes diluted by everything that is not yours. There was a time when what entered your space was chosen with care. A book you picked, a voice you trusted, a conversation that had meaning. But now, with every swipe, you are exposed to more than the mind was meant to carry. You see hundreds of faces in a single hour. You hear the noise of strangers who do not know your name. And yet, they shape how you feel. They shape what you question. They shape what you suddenly think you are missing. Being intentional with your digital diet is not about cutting everything out. It is about filtering with purpose. Just like food, some content nourishes and some content drains. Some makes you feel grounded, and some leaves you feeling not enough. The goal is not to disconnect from the world. The goal is to stay connected to yourself while being in it. Ask yourself what you are feeding your mind. What voices do you allow to speak into your thoughts? What messages repeat so often that you begin to internalize them? What kind of content leaves you feeling inspired versus inadequate? The answer is not the same for everyone, but the questions must be asked by anyone who values clarity. You are not weak for being affected by what you see. You are human. The images you absorb influence the stories you tell yourself. The narratives you consume shape the limits you unconsciously accept. And the people you follow can either remind you of who you are or distract you from who you are becoming. That is why boundaries are not just for people. They are for platforms. They are for habits. They are for the unconscious choices you make while filling the empty spaces in your day. You do not need to delete everything, but you need to decide what stays and what goes, what builds and what breaks, what lifts and what lingers in ways that are not healthy. Being intentional means choosing a time to unplug, choosing moments where your thoughts are your own, choosing to engage not because you are bored, but because you are curious. choosing to consume in a way that aligns with your values, not your insecurities. Because at the end of the day, the most powerful thing you can protect is your attention, not just for productivity, but for peace, not just to get more done, but to be more whole. And if your digital world is constantly interrupting your inner one, it may be time to step back and ask, is this feeding me or just filling the silence? You ask others how they are. You respond to texts. You answer emails. You check in on deadlines and plans and people. But how often do you check in with yourself? Not in passing, not as a checklist, but with intention, with presence, with the kind of attention you so freely give to the rest of the world. Most people move through the day in a state of quiet disconnection. They feel off, but do not ask why. They feel heavy, but keep moving. They feel tired, but push through. Not because they lack awareness, but because they have not created space for it. Life moves fast, and when you do not slow down to listen, you lose the ability to interpret what your mind and body are telling you. A daily check-in is not dramatic. It does not require hours. It requires honesty. It is a few moments where you stop and ask, what am I feeling? What am I avoiding? What do I need? And most importantly, is how I am living today aligned with what matters most to me? That simple act of reflection becomes a compass. It points you back to truth, to clarity, to choice. You do not have to wait for burnout to start asking deeper questions. You do not have to fall apart to justify rest. You do not have to be overwhelmed to pause. In fact, the strongest people are not those who never break. They are the ones who notice the cracks before they become fractures, because they are paying attention, because they have built the habit of returning to themselves before the noise of the world takes over. Checking in with yourself also builds emotional maturity. You begin to see patterns. You begin to notice what drains you and what strengthens you. You become less reactive and more reflective. You no longer wait for others to tell you how you feel. You already know. And in that knowing, you make different choices. Not perfect ones, but better ones. Ones that come from connection, not confusion. You can begin simply. Set aside 5 minutes with no distractions. Put your hand on your heart. Ask without judgment, how am I really? What do I need more of? What do I need less of? Where am I pretending to be fine? And what truth am I ready to admit? Write it down if you want, or just listen. That is enough. The listening is the point. When you check in with yourself daily, you send a message. A quiet but powerful one. It says, I am not an afterthought. My inner world matters. I am willing to meet myself fully, even when the answers are not comfortable. Because the more honest I am with myself, the less I need to be rescued by someone else. So take the moment, take the breath, ask the question, then stay long enough to hear the answer, and let that answer shape how you move forward. Your environment speaks to you even when you are not listening. The light in the room, the clutter on the table, the energy in your space, all of it sends signals. All of it shapes how you feel, how you think, how you show up. And yet, it is one of the most overlooked pieces of your emotional and mental well-being. You cannot always control what happens outside of you, but you can control what you allow around you. And that choice, made daily, is where responsibility begins. Responsibility does not mean perfection. It means ownership. It means recognizing that your space reflects your values, your priorities, and sometimes your state of mind. A messy room does not mean you are broken. But when the chaos becomes normal, it numbs you. It drains you without asking. You lose clarity not because you are incapable, but because your surroundings keep pulling your focus in 100 directions at once. Taking responsibility for your environment is an act of self-respect. It is choosing to place yourself in a space that nourishes, not depletes. It is cleaning the corner that has collected things you no longer need. It is letting go of items that carry the weight of someone you no longer are. It is adding light, texture, music, scent. not to impress others, but to come home to yourself. Because when your space reflects peace, it is easier to believe that peace is possible within you. And it is not just physical. Your environment includes the people you spend time with, the conversations you allow, the noise you normalize. Some connections feel familiar, but are built on depletion. Some routines feel safe, but are built on avoidance. Responsibility means asking, what in my environment supports who I want to become, and what subtly keeps me stuck in who I used to be? You do not need to overhaul everything overnight. You start small. One drawer, one room, one habit. And as you make those changes, you begin to feel different. Not because the space is perfect, but because it now reflects intention, and intention brings power. You begin to realize that you are not just surviving your surroundings, you are shaping them. And in doing so, you become less reactive to the world and more rooted in your choices. Because when your environment aligns with your values, it becomes easier to stay on your path. You waste less energy fighting what drains you. You spend less time fixing what could have been prevented. You begin to move with clarity, with lightness, with purpose. So look around today. Ask yourself what needs to go, what needs to be rearranged, what needs to be invited in. Then take one small action, not because the space defines you, but because it supports the version of you that is no longer willing to live on autopilot. There will always be seasons when things feel unclear, when progress feels slow, when the world asks for more than you have to give. And in those moments, habits are helpful, structure is supportive, but what carries you is something deeper. A sense of meaning that does not waver with outcomes. A connection to something that reminds you who you are, even when everything around you is shifting. Staying rooted is not about religion or ritual, though for some it might be. It is about knowing what you stand on when everything else feels uncertain. It is about having values that are not negotiable. It is about living from a center that is not defined by productivity or praise. Because when your identity is built only on what you do, you will constantly have to perform to feel safe. But when it is built on what you believe, you become steady. Not because life is easy, but because your foundation is strong. That deeper root might be your faith. It might be your belief in growth. It might be your quiet conviction that you were not born to just get through life, but to live it with depth. Whatever it is, you need it. Because without it, it is easy to drift. To become so busy chasing goals that you forget what the goals were meant to serve. To become so focused on improvement that you lose sight of presence. To become so addicted to momentum that stillness starts to feel like failure. When you are rooted, rest does not scare you. Silence does not confuse you. The absence of recognition does not make you question your worth, because you know where your value comes from. And that knowing allows you to move with intention. You are no longer building a life that looks impressive. You are building one that feels aligned. And yes, you will forget. You will get caught up. You will have days where everything feels shallow and disconnected. That is part of being human. But when you are rooted, you return faster. You pause, you remember, you realign, because you are no longer searching for meaning in every outcome. You have already found it within. So ask yourself, what anchors you? What truth are you willing to return to when the world tries to rush you? What belief will keep you steady when the noise rises? Then live from that place. Protect it. Build around it. Let it shape your choices. Let it lead you when your motivation fades. Let it remind you that who you are is not measured by how busy you are, how perfect you appear, or how much you produce. You are allowed to be grounded. You are allowed to slow down. You are allowed to live from depth in a world that often rewards surface. Stay rooted, because from that root, every habit you build will not just help you survive. It will help you grow with strength, with clarity, and with peace that does not need to be proven.